A doctor encounters a girl saying, "Dad," at the hospital entrance, and his heart, which he has suppressed for years, begins to beat again for the first time. Dr. Andrew Mendez was the kind of man everyone respected from afar. Tall, with good posture, his hair already graying, walking firmly through the hospital corridors. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see it. There was something broken in him. A famous surgeon known for saving many lives during his career, Andrew was also the heir to one of the largest fortunes in Houston City. He lived alone in a huge old house in the Roma Norte neighborhood, an elegant place. On the outside, the house was impressive, but on the inside, there was only silence, a silence that hurt. A dark living room, curtains always closed, paintings covered with white cloths, as if hiding the memories could erase what had already happened. 9 years ago, Renata died. His wife, the only woman he had ever loved. A car accident, fast, brutal, a drunk driver, a badly taken curve, a rainy night. She didn't stand a chance. From that day on, Andrew simply stopped. He didn't stop working. On the contrary, he started working even harder. He threw himself into his shifts, into difficult surgeries, into medical reports. He left home before sunrise and returned very late at night. He ate standing up, slept poorly, spoke little. His colleagues said he was cold, distant, but it was just pain. Pain that he swallowed, that he hid, well guarded behind the mask of a successful doctor. At the hospital, no one tried to talk to him much anymore. They respected him. Some were even afraid of him, and he was alone. Deep in the pocket of his coat, he still carried a silver chain. It was hers. One day before a surgery, he almost dropped it inside the patient. Since then, he no longer took it out of his pocket, but he never wore it around his neck again. Andrew no longer dreamed, no longer smiled, no longer allowed himself to remember for long. When the memories came, he walked faster, changed the channel, turned his face away, as if fleeing from the memory was a way of not feeling. At home, no one went up to the second floor. There was their closed bedroom, full of dust. Her favorite dress was still hanging on the closet door, untouched, as if waiting for someone to return. But no one returned, and little by little, Andrew shut down inside. One day at a time, he still saved lives, it's true, but he no longer knew what to do with his own, and so he continued home, hospital, home, like someone who breathes out of obligation, like someone who just waits for time to pass without expecting anything else. That morning, the sky was gray, heavy. Houston City felt slower, colder. Andrew had just come out of a long surgery, one of those that take everything out of a doctor. He still felt the room spinning a little around him, his body tense, his shoulders slumped. He walked slowly along the sidewalk in front of the hospital, with his head down, lost in his thoughts. As always, he didn't hear the horns, or the smells of food coming from a street cart, or the stares of passers-by. It was just another day, just another body operated on, just another attempt to forget that he still missed a hug that no longer existed. That's when he stopped, without knowing why, his feet standing still right there, in the middle of the sidewalk. He felt a chill on the back of his neck, a shiver that slowly crept up his spine, and then he saw her. Across the street, right in front of the hospital, was a small, skinny, very dirty girl. Her tangled hair covered part of her face. The dress she was wearing might once have been white, but now it was just a rag, torn at the edges, dirty with mud and dust. She didn't move or blink, she just stared. She stared right at him, his eyes. Andrew felt his stomach lurch. Her eyes were the same, identical, the same dark, deep shade, with a sparkle he knew better than anything else in the world. The eyes he sometimes dreamed of without meaning to. Lucia's eyes. He froze. She didn't say anything. She just stared as if she had been waiting a long time for this moment, as if she already knew who he was, as if she could see inside him. Time stood still. The noise of the city disappeared. His heart began to beat faster, erratically, as if something inside him was awakening after years of sleep. Andrew took a step, just one, still wondering if this was real, if it was a hallucination. But the girl also moved. She took 2 small steps toward him, her bare feet touching the cold cement. Her eyes were still wide open, her chin trembling. She opened her mouth. Her voice came out like a sigh, a weak, uncertain, pained whisper. "Daddy." And then she fell right there, in front of the hospital, like a dry leaf falling from a tree. Her small, light body fell to the ground with a thud, and Andrew ran without thinking, without understanding, without breathing. He just ran. He knelt beside the fragile body of the girl, his hands trembling, his white coat now touching the dirty sidewalk. His heart was beating so hard that it felt like it was going to explode in his chest. People passed by. Some looked on with curiosity. Others hurried by. But Andrew only saw her, small, almost colorless, her skin dirty from so much grime, her hair stuck to her face, her dress torn, as if it had been pulled, scratched, ripped with force, and her knee, her left knee was wounded, with an ugly cut, already infected, covered with dry dirt and old blood. It hurt just to look at her, but nothing hurt more than her eyes. When he turned her over carefully, resting her head on his lap, her eyes opened for a second, just a second, and it was like being punched in the chest. Her eyes didn't look alike. They weren't almost the same. They were the same, identical. The same eyes that looked at him on lazy Sunday mornings before breakfast. The same ones he kissed gently before going to sleep. The same ones that laughed with the sparkle of a lifetime. Renata, his deceased wife. But now those eyes were alive and looking at him. Although weak, although dirty, although lost, they were her eyes. Andrew held the girl's face so carefully that he seemed afraid of breaking it. He felt her skin cold, fragile. His heart knotted up and rose to his throat. She opened her mouth again, but no sound came out, only a slight tremor on her lips. He felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He felt the world spinning. An old weight, held for almost 10 years, rose like a cry that was never uttered. How was it possible? A tear escaped before he realized it. "Hey," he whispered, not knowing what to say. "Stay with me." "Yes, I'm here. I'll take care of you." She stopped. She looked at him, breathing deeply, with difficulty. Her chest rose and fell slowly, as if breathing hurt. And that's when she said, "Dad." The word came out softly, almost like a sigh, and the sound hit Andrew like a hammer blow to the chest. He didn't understand it at the time, or maybe he did, but he didn't want to believe it. That girl, wounded, dirty, alone, had called him Dad. He was paralyzed. She tried to take another step, but couldn't. Her body gave out. Her little legs buckled and she fell quickly, as if the world had pulled her back. Andrew picked up the girl in his arms. She was too light, her body hot with fever, the strong smell of dirt mixed with sweat, injury, abandonment. His hands were shaking. He looked at the girl in his arms as if he couldn't believe she was real. How could this be? Who was she? Why had she said that? How did she know his face? What was her name? Where did she come from? Where were her parents? But now was not the time for questions. He pressed the girl against his chest, felt her thin ribs, her bones almost without flesh. He felt her breathing becoming lighter. And in that moment, between fear and doubt, between pain and shock, Andrew made a decision without thinking. He wasn't going to let her go. Whoever she was, wherever she came from, he wasn't going to leave her alone, because that whisper, that little word spoken with such hope, with such weakness, Daddy. It was the first sound in years that broke the silence inside him, and it hurt. But it hurt in a different way. It hurt as if a heart were trying to beat again. The world around him seemed distant. The horns, the voices, the footsteps of people, everything faded into a muffled buzz. He could only hear his own heavy breathing and the soft, almost non-existent sound of the girl's breathing, her forehead pressed against his chest, her face hidden in the fold of his robe, and her arms loose, limp, as if she had already given up. Andrew ran across the street. Cars braked. A woman shouted something. He ran straight through the main entrance, pushed the glass doors open with his shoulder, and burst into the lobby like an avalanche. "Emergency!" he shouted in a hoarse, desperate voice. "I need help here, now." The nurses looked at him in fear. They recognized him instantly, the man in pieces with an unconscious girl in his arms. "Bring me a stretcher!" he shouted again angrily, urgently. "Now!" 2 nurses ran over. One of them tried to ask, "Doctor, but who?" "I said now," he interrupted, leaving no room for discussion. The guard appeared. He tried to say something about procedures, about people entering without identification, but Andrew didn't even listen. He continued straight down the hall, ignoring stairs, rules, the order of things, because none of that mattered. The elevator was going to take too long, and the stretcher wasn't coming. He ran up the stairs, 3 floors without stopping, her body pressed against his chest. On the 3rd floor, he stormed into the emergency room like a hurricane. He shouted names, asked for help, pointed to the nearest stretcher. "She's unconscious, dehydrated, injured. She has an infection in her knee, a fever. She's breathing, but weakly, rapidly." The interns obeyed without thinking. He was an authority there, but now there was something new in his gaze, something they had never seen before: fear. Andrew stood next to the stretcher while they connected the machines, put in the IV, took her temperature, cleaned the wound. He didn't let go of her hand at any moment, that small, dirty hand, hot with fever, and he stood there, holding on tight, like someone holding someone who is about to fall into a bottomless pit. At that moment, in that overly bright room, he was no longer just the famous doctor. He was just a man who suddenly found himself faced with something he didn't understand, but which he needed to protect with his life. Later, the emergency room was silent. Only the sound of the monitors filled the air, that constant dry beep, beep, beep that seemed to mark the passage of time. Andrew sat down, next to the stretcher, with his shoulders slumped, exhausted, his face tense, his gaze fixed on the little girl lying there, so small, so quiet. Now she was connected to an IV that slowly flowed down, the transparent tube to the needle stuck in her little arm. The arm was so thin that it looked like the needle could pierce right through it. The dirty skin had not been completely cleaned, but now her little face had a little more color. Her body was breathing, albeit with effort, and Andrew, without realizing it, squeezed her hand tightly. A tiny, warm hand, full of cuts and calluses. A hand that had already lived too much for someone so young. He looked at her as if trying to solve a mystery. Who was this girl? Why did she call him that? And how did she know who he was? That's when something caught his attention. In the side pocket of her torn dress, almost hidden among the loose threads, was a folded piece of paper, a crumpled, dirty little piece that looked like it had been carried everywhere. Andrew took it out carefully, afraid of tearing it. He opened it slowly, still holding her hand with his other hand. And there, on that piece of paper, the world stopped again. It was an old photo, a photo of him, young, in a white coat in front of the hospital. It was one of those images that appeared in the newspapers when he won an award for pioneering surgery. And next to the photo, taped on, was a drawing made with colored pencils, a child's drawing, with crooked lines, innocent scribbles. It was a man in a white coat, next to him a girl in a blue dress, and above, written in large, crooked letters, full of mistakes, "He is going to find me." Andrew read it once, then again. The phrase seemed to vibrate inside him. "He's coming to find me." He turned to look at it again. How? Who did that? Who taught her to draw that man? Who showed her the photo? Who told her that one day he would be there on that sidewalk, in that hospital, on that cloudy morning? His throat closed up. The paper trembled between his fingers. He felt a weight on his chest, a heat rising without asking permission. It was pain. It was nostalgia. It was confusion. But above all, it was a kind of love that he didn't know where it came from. He lowered his face, rested his forehead on the back of her hand, and stayed there breathing deeply, trying to stay strong. "Who are you, little one?" he whispered with a broken voice. "Who put my name in your path?" The girl did not answer. She was still asleep. But for the first time, Andrew felt that this girl was not just another life to save. She was an answer. Although he still did not know what the question was, the door to the room opened slowly with that slight creak that only attentive ears can notice. Andrew raised his tired, red eyes and saw the doctor in charge of the area enter. It was Dr. Jimena, one of the most experienced doctors in the hospital. He had known her for years, respected her, trusted her, but now, just by looking at her face, he knew the news would not be good. She was holding a clipboard with papers, but she hesitated before speaking. She looked at the girl on the stretcher, unconscious, breathing with the help of oxygen. Then she looked back at Andrew and sighed. "Doctor," she began in a low voice, as if weighing each word. "We've been able to do the initial tests. We'll still need more time to review everything carefully, but we already have an idea of what this girl has been through." He didn't respond, just stared at her and squeezed the little hand he was still holding tighter. "She is malnourished to a worrying degree. Her body shows clear signs of prolonged starvation." Andrew closed his eyes for a second, just a second. Then he looked back at the doctor. "In addition," she continued with a lump in her throat that she tried to hide, "we detected old fractures, bones that broke and healed on their own as best they could, without a cast, without alignment." She probably felt a lot of pain for a long time. Andrew swallowed hard. The image of a small child with a twisted arm, walking, limping, with no one around, formed in his mind. The world seemed to shake inside Andrew. He got up from the chair, unable to hide his shock. He walked to a corner of the room, ran his hand over his face, then turned to the doctor. "Do you have any idea what could have happened?" She shook her head. "Only she can tell when she is strong enough. But it is clear that this girl lived in a situation of extreme risk, and for a long time in silence. The only sounds were the drip of the IV and the faint hum of the oxygen machine." Andrew slowly returned to the chair next to the stretcher, sat down, took the girl's hand again, and spoke softly, almost in a whisper, as if it were only for her. "You won't have to go through this anymore. I promise." The doctor remained silent, looked at the two of them, and respectfully left the room slowly, closing the door carefully. There, in that cold hospital room, between the pain of the past and the fear of the present, something was born that even medicine could not explain. It was early morning, one of those very quiet ones, when even the hospital seems to breathe slowly. The lights were dim, and only the sound of the machines broke the silence. Andrew didn't want to leave. He remained there, sitting next to the bed, his body hunched over, his head bowed, fighting against exhaustion. His hand still held hers tightly, as if just touching her could keep her there. Suddenly, a scream. "Mommy!" The girl screamed loudly, frightened, her eyes half closed, her body trembling. "Mommy!" Ah. Andrew woke up with a start at that very moment. He got up quickly and leaned over her. Hey, calm down. You're safe. I'm here. Everything is fine now." But she wasn't listening. She was in a place of her own, her eyes wide open, full of fear, her body curled up into a ball, as if she wanted to hide from the world. And then, softly, she began to repeat in a weak voice, hoarse from crying so much. She said, "You were coming, that we just had to wait. In the place where the rain runs." Andrew froze. Those words struck him like lightning inside. The place where the rain runs. No one knew that. No one. That's what Renata called the place where they met. A small section of sidewalk near the hospital where the water from the canal flowed directly onto the ground, making a beautiful sound on rainy days. They met there one day when she was trying to escape the downpour, and he offered her his umbrella. That's where it all began. She always laughed when they passed that spot. She said it was the magical place where fate slipped in to bring two strangers together. Andrew felt a chill down his spine, his eyes filled with tears. That couldn't be a coincidence. How did that girl know? He bent down slowly, resting his forehead on hers. "Who told you that, my love?" She didn't answer. She just whispered with her mouth almost pressed against the pillow. "My mom. She said I just had to wait, and you would come." His chest tightened so much that he could hardly breathe. Those words echoed with a force he couldn't explain. It was as if Renata were there, as if she had left a message that crossed time, pain, and death. He held her little face in both hands and whispered, "I'm here. Yes, I'm here now, and I'll never leave again." She closed her eyes again slowly, as if returning to a dream, and he stood there still, his heart racing, feeling that something sacred had just happened. The days that followed were a tangle of silence, waiting, and hope. Valentina, as he later learned, spent her hours between light dreams and a lost gaze. Andrew did not leave her side. He arrived early and slept in the hard chair next to the bed, sometimes with a blanket over him, other times with only his robe as a pillow. He watched her with every breath, every movement. Sometimes she dreamed, murmuring nonsense. Sometimes she just looked at him with those big, deep eyes, as if they knew too much. But inside, Andrew was fighting a silent battle. He needed to know, he needed to understand why that girl had his photo, why she said those things, why that look hurt him so much. It was as if she carried a part of him that he didn't even know existed. So he secretly requested a DNA test, without telling anyone, a strand of her hair, a little blood from the normal tests, and he took it to the lab himself. No one at the hospital knew. It was just between him and the emptiness he felt in his chest. The days passed slowly. He tried not to think about it, but he thought about it all the time. What if it was true? What if she was Renata's daughter? What if somehow life had taken a strange turn, and there was the answer to everything he didn't understand? Then the white envelope arrived. Nothing special on the outside, but inside it held a world. He was alone when he opened it, sitting in the small hospital dining room at dusk. The cold lights, the empty table, the distant sound of the soda machines. He opened it carefully, like someone uncovering a wound, and read, "No genetic link between individual A, Andrew Mendez, and individual B, Valentina, a minor." He read it again and again, but the words did not change. She was not his daughter. The world around him fell silent. He closed his eyes, left the paper on the table, his hand trembling, a lump in his throat. She was not his daughter. He tried to reason with himself, tried to tell himself that it was good to know the truth, that now he could move on, that he had done what he had to do. But his heart only knew how to hurt, because somewhere deep down, he had already begun to love her, not because of blood, not because of logic, but because of something that had no name. And now, with that cold result in his hand, he no longer knew what to do with all those feelings because the truth had arrived. But it wasn't what he had expected. He walked slowly through the hospital corridors, the envelope still crumpled in his hands. Each step felt as if it weighed 100 kilos. His head bowed, his shoulders slumped, his heart sunk in a silence that only he could hear. The DNA test did not lie. That girl was not his daughter. She did not have his blood. She did not come from Renata. She was not the miracle he wanted to believe in deep down. The sun was already beginning to set. The orange-painted sky paused for a second. That's when he heard the voice, "Doctor," soft, trembling, but alive. He turned slowly, and there she was, Valentina, sitting on the couch in the room with a blanket covering her up to her feet, her big eyes filled with tears, her face still pale, but with a light that couldn't be explained. She wasn't crying loudly. She wasn't making a scene. She was just looking. She looked like someone who begs without speaking, like someone who has already lost too much to cry out again. "Mom said you would be my new dad." Her voice broke in the middle of the sentence. She looked down for a moment, moving her little fingers sadly, fearfully. "I know it's a lie," she continued softly, almost as if apologizing for being there. "But I can be your daughter, even if that's the case." Andrew felt the floor disappear. He stood still, not knowing what to do with his hands, with his words, with what he was feeling. She looked up again, and that alone was enough. It was a look that asked for a place, that asked for love, that asked to belong. He approached her slowly, knelt in front of her, looked her straight in the eyes, and unable to hold back any longer, let a tear fall. "Hey," he whispered, his voice breaking. "There's nothing fake about this. Do you hear me?" She nodded very slowly. A tear also rolled down her little face. "If you want," he said, his heart beating like never before, "then I'm your real dad." She threw herself into his arms, small, fragile, but whole in that embrace. And there, in that simple room, on that ordinary evening, two broken lives met, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. After a brief conversation, he discovered that she was 7 years old. That was her quiet answer when Andrew asked. 7. With her little fingers trembling, she raised her hand with difficulty. She didn't look like she was even 5. She was so small, so skinny, so fragile. But when she spoke, she had a serious tone, as if she had lived much longer. The two of them were sitting in the dimly lit hospital room, with no one else around. She sat with her feet dangling, not touching the floor, and he sat beside her, listening to every word as if they were pieces of glass, asking questions gently, without pressing, giving her space. "My mom," she began slowly, choosing each word carefully. Her name was Raina. Andrew noted the name with his eyes. Raina. It sounded strong, but in the girl's words it came with sadness. She coughed a lot every day. She got tired. She slept on the floor, hugging me. Even though she was sick, she always sang softly, a little song that was just ours. And then she made a sound, a broken melody that sounded more like a lullaby. She said I was all she had, but that she was going to go with God, and that I was going to stay with my new dad, too. She had a photo of you. Andrew didn't blink. He just listened. Valentina looked at the floor, then at him as if asking for permission to continue, and when she saw that he wasn't going to interrupt her, she took a deep breath. One day we were in an ugly, dark place. It was a wooden house. You could hear lots of people shouting and fighting. I was scared. She paused. She closed her eyes. The memory weighed heavily on her, and then someone shouted, "Umbre!" Then there was the smell of smoke, a lot of it, and she, my mom, woke me up in her arms. I was shaking, sweating, and she said to me, "If we get separated, wait at the place in the rain that I showed you. He'll find you." Andrew felt his heart tighten again, and then he asked, with all the care in the world, what happened. Then she hugged me tight and ran. The fire was everywhere. She was coughing a lot, but she carried me up the stairs in her arms. The house was rumbling. The roof was moving. I was screaming that it hurt, and she said, "I love you. You're my little sunshine." Valentina then lowered her head. Her voice became almost a whisper, and then she opened the window. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Go." I said no, that I was afraid, but she kissed me on the forehead and threw me out. I fell on some leaves. I scratched my arm and she couldn't get out. Silence. Andrew closed his eyes. He felt the tears falling on their own. He didn't try to hide them. That girl was giving him a piece of her soul, and he was there to receive it. She was everything. Everything, said Valentina with red eyes but without crying. And now, only I remain. Andrew took her little hand, squeezed it tightly, and replied softly, "Not now, Valentina. Now you're not alone anymore." She looked at him, said nothing, but there, in that silence, something came together. It was the kind of love that is born without explanation. After that conversation with Valentina, Andrew began to see everything with new eyes. The name Raina sounded like an old melody he couldn't recognize. Until one morning, sitting alone in the hospital office, leafing through old papers and stored memories, he stopped at one of those photos that you keep without knowing why, but that at the right moment becomes a clue. It was an old, faded photo of his wedding to Renata. And there, next to her, smiling with flowers in her hair and eyes full of joy, was Daniela, his younger sister. She was only 16 at the time, but she already showed a huge heart, restless, funny, full of ideas, always close to her sister. "Raina," he whispered, touching the image with his fingertips. It was like a click. Renata called her that, a silly nickname they used between themselves. My little queen always said it, hugging her sister as if she were a princess. How had he not put the pieces together before? The nickname became a name, the name a mystery. Andrew's heart began to beat faster. He grabbed the phone and called a friend who worked at the registry office. He explained little, only what was necessary. And that same day, he went in person to the civil registry in the southern part of the city. The building was old, hot, and smelled of stored paper and burnt coffee. He sat down in front of an employee who, upon hearing the name Daniela Morales, typed quickly on the computer and pulled out a large, dusty book. "Yes, we have a record," she said in an emotionless voice. "But it's incomplete. The mother signed, but there is no father's name, no attached documents, just a handwritten note that says, 'Home birth registered late.'" Andrew asked to see it. His heart sank when he read the name Valentina. The handwriting was simple, shaky, as if Daniela had written it quickly, perhaps fearfully, perhaps not knowing if she would have another chance. But there was her signature, Daniela Morales, and below it, the blank space where the father's name should have been. He stared at that space for a while. That empty space was Valentina's whole life, a place where everything fit: pain, abandonment, silence, and now, perhaps, hope. Andrew closed the book carefully. His mind was no longer thinking like a doctor or a man of science. Now it was his heart that ruled, and he felt with a certainty that needed no proof. That girl was part of something he had once loved, something that still loved her. Daniela had left a trail, and now it was up to him to follow it to the end. The neighborhood was simple, remote. The houses were small, side by side, with low fences, peeling paint, and closed windows. Andrew stopped in front of the one they had pointed out to him. He stood there for a while, just looking. The wooden door had marks from the sun and rain, and the number was barely visible. It was hard to imagine that there, in that hidden place, Daniela, or rather Reina, had lived her last days with Valentina. The key, which the registry still kept with old documents, opened the lock with a sharp click. The air that came out from inside was old, dense, smelling of things stored in frozen time. Andrew entered slowly, with soft steps, as if any noise could hurt the past. The place was small, with old furniture covered with dusty sheets. There were broken toys on the floor, drawings taped to the walls with yellow tape, and a crooked photo of two girls smiling, Daniela and Renata, as children, side by side, with their feet in the sand. He went straight to the bedroom. In one corner there was an old wooden wardrobe with creaky hinges. Andrew opened it carefully, checked the drawers, moved old clothes and some personal items, and then, at the back, among a pile of crumpled blouses, he found what seemed to be waiting for him: a brown envelope with his name written by hand. Andrew stopped. He sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in his hands, felt the old paper, the folded corners, and opened it carefully. Several newspaper clippings fell out, all with photos of him, old headlines. Doctor saves the life of a girl in critical condition. Dr. Andrew Mendez honored at International Congress. Surgeon donates equipment to Children's Hospital. Daniela had kept everything, and under the clippings, he opened a sheet of paper folded in half. It was a letter written in cursive, nervous handwriting, simple words, but full of urgency and love. Andrew, I don't have much time. You know how life gets when it gets so tight that you can't take it anymore. If she ever comes to your door, please don't ask any questions, just hug her. That's what my sister would do. Renata loved with all her heart, even when it hurt. I'm trying to be like her. Valentina is good. She has the heart of the sister I lost. She deserves to live, not just survive. If you're reading this, it's because somehow she found her way to you. So please, just hold her for me, for her, for Renata. With love, Daniela. Andrew dropped the letter on his lap. His chest felt heavy. Her words continued to float in the air as if she were saying them at that very moment. Just hold her. He brought his hands to his face and cried silently. A cry without screams, without relief. A cry of someone who finally understands the weight of it all. Daniela knew. She knew she was leaving. She knew Valentina would stay, and yet she asked for nothing more than a gesture, a hug. At that moment, Andrew knew that this was no coincidence. It was a gift, and he was ready to receive it. He left the house. The street was narrow, with crooked stone sidewalks and cables hanging like cobwebs between the poles. Andrew walked slowly, counting the house numbers until he stopped in front of one that was burned, with black walls and windows covered with crossed boards. It was abandoned, but it still smelled of tragedy. Not even time had managed to completely erase the mark of the fire. This was the house where Daniela had entered, weak and sick, and from which she never emerged. Andrew took a deep breath, feeling the heavy air. He looked around, trying to understand how all this could have happened so close by, so hidden. A few meters from where she lived, Renata's sister had faced fear, illness, and fire alone, all for Valentina. An elderly woman sitting at the door of the neighboring house watched him intently. She wore thick glasses, a stained apron on her legs, and held a cup of tea. When she realized he was looking at her, she gave a small nod, calling him over. "You're related to the girl, aren't you?" she asked in a hoarse but firm voice. "Yes," Andrew replied, approaching her. "She was my sister-in-law, Daniela." The woman made a sad gesture, lowering her gaze. "We used to call her Queen. She lived nearby and was always very quiet. She was afraid of her own shadow. You could see it in her eyes. She never said where she came from. She only talked about her daughter, who was everything to her. She took a sip of tea, looked again at the burned house, and continued. I saw the fire. It was sudden. No one understood how it started. All I know is that when we went out to try to help, she had already thrown the girl out the second-floor window. She saved her daughter with what little strength she had left. Andrew listened silently, his chest tight. You know, young man, said the woman, slowly stirring the sugar with her spoon. She always talked about a man, a certain uncle in a robe. She would say, when I'm gone, she'll find him. The uncle in the robe. He'll take care of Valentina. She deserves to be happy. Andrew lowered his eyes, feeling a lump in his throat. The neighbor continued calmly. I thought it was just the ramblings of a tired woman, but she said it with faith, with certainty, as if she had left the girl in the hands of an angel. Now I see that it wasn't fantasy. It was destiny. He couldn't answer. He just looked once more at the house in ruins. The pain was great, but there was also a different warmth in that woman's words. Daniela had not left Valentina to chance. She believed, she knew, and she waited until the last second to ensure that her daughter had a future. And now that future had a name and a heart and arms ready to embrace her. It began to rain softly as Andrew left the ruined house. The water ran down the sidewalks and made the same sound he remembered from when he met Renata. The sound of rain hitting the concrete, mixed with the sound of the world turning slowly. He walked back, lost in his thoughts, trying to piece everything together, his heart heavy with everything he had heard. Daniela's face came and went in his memory, her smile, her tired eyes the last time they saw each other, the silly jokes she made when she was still just Renata's younger sister. And now she was more than that. Now she was courage. When he stopped to rest for a moment under a marquee, he heard the sound of cans being moved. A man with a gray beard and torn clothes recognized him. Doctor, he said in a hoarse voice. You're asking about the girl from the fire, right? Andrew nodded. Yes, I saw her. I was nearby. Everyone was running and screaming, but she didn't run. The old man looked down the wet street, as if he were seeing it all again. She stood in the middle of the fire with the child in her arms. She was trembling, but steady, strong. She looked at the window, crossed herself, and threw her daughter out. She threw her with all her heart, and stayed there, in the middle of the flames. Andrew felt his legs tremble. The man continued, his eyes filled with tears. She could have left. She could have jumped too, but she didn't want to. The girl was everything. It was as if saving her daughter was the last right thing she would ever do in her life, and it was. They remained silent. The rain fell softly, slowly washing away on the sorrows of the street. It seems that you were the name, she said the man, before turning away, the one in the bathrobe. Now I know why Andrew didn't answer. He just put his hand on his chest, not because of pain, but to feel. His heart was beating fast, as if calling someone. Hours later, already at the hospital, he slowly entered the room. The light was dim, the curtain danced in the wind. And there, in the corner of the armchair, was Valentina, sitting, hugging her robe as if it were a blanket. She slept curled up as if the world were still too big, her feet bare, her face pressed against the white fabric, her eyes tightly closed. But her body seemed at peace. Andrew stood in the doorway watching. In that moment, he understood what a refuge was. He understood that sometimes love doesn't come with last names or papers. It just arrives and stays. He approached slowly, crouched down beside her, and lovingly ran his hand through her messy hair. She didn't wake up, but she smiled in her sleep, and that smile was everything. The following days were a whirlwind of paperwork, interviews, and visits. Andrew, who had always worked with scalpels, diagnoses, and cold operating rooms, now faced another kind of challenge, the bureaucratic world of social services. But he didn't hesitate. He filled out each form with the same care he put into the most delicate surgeries. He didn't do it out of obligation, but out of love. A love that still hurt, but was beginning to make sense. At the Child Protection Office, a woman with thin glasses, a firm voice, and attentive eyes greeted him. They sat across from each other. Valentina waited in the room, drawing quietly with her knees tucked up to her chest. "Dr. Mendez," she began in a neutral professional tone, "you requested temporary custody. We reviewed the case carefully. The story is truly moving, and your bond with the girl is evident." Andrew nodded, serious. "But we have to be realistic," she continued. "Valentina is a girl marked by severe trauma. She experienced abandonment, hunger, violence. She saw her mother burned to death. She survived alone for who knows how long. She is not an ordinary girl. She has scars that are not only on her body." "I know," he replied firmly, "and I'm not going to run away from that." The social worker folded her hands on the table. "It's important for you to know that she may never fully trust you, that it may take years for her to sleep without fear, that she may never say, 'Dad,' naturally, and that she will need psychological support for quite some time to be able to face those traumas. Are you still willing to go through with this?" Andrew took a deep breath, his gaze steady, without hesitation. "If she trusts me just a little bit, it's worth it. If she smiles once, it's worth it. I'm not here for her to love me like a dad. I'm here so she'll never be afraid of anyone again." The woman was silent for a moment. Then she simply signed one of the papers. The temporary guardianship was accepted. The evaluation process continues until the judge signs. But as of today, Valentina is officially going with you. He closed his eyes for a moment, said nothing, just felt the weight of the moment, and at the same time a new lightness in his chest. In the room, Valentina continued to draw. She was drawing a crooked house with large windows. Next to it was a man in a robe and a little girl in a blue dress. Andrew crouched down next to her. "Are we going home?" She looked at him. She didn't smile, but she nodded slowly. That was enough. In that small gesture was the beginning of everything. The first few days in the house were silent, almost as if the air were afraid to make a sound. Andrew's mansion, which had stood still in time for years, now had a new presence, tiny but enormous in meaning. Valentina walked slowly through the rooms, shuffling her feet on the cold wooden floor, her eyes attentive to every corner, as if everything could suddenly disappear. She hardly spoke, just looked, accepted food without asking, changed her clothes by herself, folded the blanket on the sofa, left her shoes lined up at her bedroom door, didn't ask questions, didn't complain. It was as if she were trying to take up as little space as possible, as if, even though no one had said anything to her, she believed she shouldn't bother anyone. At night, she slept in the room next to his, where Andrew had kept everything as simple as possible. A small bed, a light-colored curtain, a table lamp, and on the bed, an old sweater of his, made of thick gray wool, smelling of hospital mixed with aftershave. She hugged that sweater as if it were a person, wrapped herself in it, curled up inside it, and only then could she sleep. It was as if that little piece of him were the only safe thing in the world. Andrew watched silently from outside the half-open door. At first, he thought about asking her if she wanted another blanket, a stuffed animal, a softer pillow, but something inside him said, "Leave her alone. Don't take away the little she chose to hold on to." On the third morning, the sun shone more strongly through the windows. Andrew was making a simple coffee, lost in his thoughts, when he heard soft footsteps behind him. Valentina stood in the kitchen doorway with her hair tousled and her eyes still half asleep. "Can I have milk with cinnamon?" He turned and smiled gently at her. "Of course. This house is yours now. You can do whatever you want." She sat on the edge of the table, took a sip, and remained silent for a while. Then, without looking up, she asked, "Why are you so sad when you have such a big house?" Andrew stood still. The coffee cup remained suspended in the air, his hand frozen. The question cut like a knife, simple, direct, without malice, but with a truth he had never had the courage to face. Why, in the end, so much loneliness in a place with so much space? Why so much silence where there could be music, laughter, life? He didn't answer. He just moved closer, knelt beside her, and without saying a word, hugged her for the first time. It wasn't the hug of a doctor or a strong man. It was a hug full of fragility. Valentina took a while to react, but after a few seconds, she rested her face on his shoulder. She said nothing, nor was it necessary. At that moment, the emptiness of the house seemed smaller, and the silence finally became a refuge. The nights began to change in the house. Little by little, the silence gave way to small sounds that had not been heard there for years. The clinking of a glass being washed, soft footsteps in the hallway, and, even rarer, Andrew's low, soft voice telling stories. Valentina still slept hugging his coat, but now she asked him to stay in the room a little longer, just until she closed her eyes, she said. And he stayed, sitting on the edge of the bed, turning on the soft light on the nightstand and beginning to speak. It was on one of those nights that the story was born. "Ta, do you want me to tell you a story?" he asked, a little shyly. She nodded, her eyes already heavy with sleep. He took a deep breath and began. Once upon a time, there was a doctor, a very good doctor. He saved many people, helped everyone, but one day, he lost something very important. His light. Valentina blinked slowly, interested. "His light," she murmured in a sleepy voice. "Yes, the light that made him see life in color. After losing that light, he began to walk alone for many years. Just home and hospital, hospital and home. No laughter, no hugs, just coldness inside." She listened quietly until one day Andrew paused and looked at her. He saw a star lying on the ground. It was small, a little dirty, a little damaged, but it shone from within, even though it didn't know it. Valentina closed her eyes, but a little smile appeared on her face. "And what did he do?" he whispered. At first she didn't understand. She was afraid. She thought she no longer knew how to take care of anything that shone, but the star didn't ask for much, just a little corner, a little warmth, and above all, a bedtime story. She let out a soft giggle, almost like a sigh, and yes, he told her. Yes, every night, because when he spoke, the star slept peacefully, and when she slept peacefully, the doctor felt that perhaps her light was returning too. Her breathing slowed. Andrew leaned down slowly, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, "Good night, my star." She didn't answer. She was already asleep, but the coat pressed against his chest felt warmer that night, and deep inside his chest, something slowly lit up, like a light being reborn. It was a windy night, one of those nights when gusts of wind bang on the windows and make the branches of the trees cast ugly shadows on the walls. Valentina was already in bed, her eyes open, staring at the ceiling, Andrew's old coat wrapped around her body like a cocoon. The light on the nightstand flickered slightly, and the sound of the wind outside made the room feel colder than usual. Andrew entered quietly, as he did every night. He sat down on the edge of the bed with a children's book in his hand. But before he began to read, he noticed that her face was tense, her eyes slightly open. "Are you okay, my star?" She turned to look at him slowly, thought for a moment, and then, for the first time since she had arrived at that house, she spoke of a fear she had kept hidden for a long time. "I'm afraid of the dark." Her voice came out small, as if it were a secret. Andrew put the book on his lap. He looked at her carefully, calmly. "Is there something in the dark that scares you?" She hesitated. Then she nodded. "I don't know what it is, but in the dark I feel like no one will find me, that I'm going to disappear, that I'm going to scream, and no one will hear me." The words came out slowly, but with the weight of someone who had already lived through many nights like that. And sometimes she continued to stare at the window. "Hey, the wind is making noise, and it sounds like people fighting." And then I remember the screams, the blows, the fire. Andrew felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to be able to take that away from her. He wanted to have arrived sooner, to have protected her sooner. But he could only be there now. "But you know," she said, suddenly calmer, "it's different here." He frowned curiously. "Why?" "Because when you're here, I'm not so scared. Even if it's dark, even if it's windy, my mom said you were very good." She hugged her coat tighter, as if it were an anchor. "It's just that when you're near me, I feel warm. I feel that if I get lost, you'll find me." Andrew took a deep breath. He felt the tears wanting to come out, but he held them back. He held them back so she wouldn't see. He knelt down beside the bed and stroked her hair gently. "I'll never let you get lost. Do you hear me?" Valentina nodded, then reached out and grabbed his finger tightly. And there, on that windy, scary night, a little girl began to trust, and a man began to believe again. One day the sky was cloudy, but it wasn't raining. A gray sky that seemed to match the silence of Andrew and Valentina's footsteps. The two walked side by side, unhurried, crossing the gravel path of the small cemetery in the center of town. They didn't say a word the whole way, only the sound of their shoes on the dry leaves and the soft wind whistling among the graves could be heard. Andrew was carrying a bag with 2 candles and a cloth to clean the tombstone. Valentina, her little hand clasped tightly to his, was hiding a flower behind her back. A single flower picked from the garden that morning. It was a simple flower, still with a little dirt on the root, but the way she held it said it all. To her, it was a treasure. They slowly reached the grave. It was a double grave, 2 marble plaques, one next to the other. On one side was Renata's name, on the other, Daniela's. The dates, the full names, and a deep silence all around. Andrew knelt down first, carefully wiping the dust off the letters with the cloth. Then he lit the candles with trembling fingers. He breathed slowly. He didn't cry, but his eyes were full. It was a pain she already knew, but now it came with another weight. Valentina stood there for a while, watching. Then she approached without saying anything. She bent down and placed the flower between the 2 tombstones, right in the center. "This is from Mom," she whispered in a soft but firm voice. "Is she by your side?" She looked at the stone with respect, as if waiting for an answer. Then she looked at Andrew. "They're not alone anymore, are they?" He nodded slowly with a slight smile. "No, my star. Now no one is alone." Valentina reached out her hand. He took it. They stood there for a while in silence, the wind blowing their hair and the candles flickering, but not going out. The cemetery felt peaceful, and on that little piece of land, where before there had only been sadness, now something new was also being born. It was love. Renata and Daniela did not return, but they left behind the most beautiful thing, the courage to love again. A few days later, the answer came. The courtroom was large, silent, and cold, with high walls and wooden benches. Everything seemed too serious for something as delicate as what was happening that day. Andrew and Valentina were sitting next to each other, holding hands, waiting for the moment that seemed like it would never come. She was wearing a little blue dress that she had chosen herself. He was wearing a suit, but no tie, because Valentina said he looked more handsome that way. When the judge entered, everyone stood up. Andrew's heart was beating so hard he could almost hear it. He sat down again, trying to stay calm, but inside he was pure emotion. The process was quick. The social workers had already given their approval. Everything was ready. All that was left was for the judge to say aloud what Andrew's heart already knew, and then he said it. "From this moment on, in accordance with the law, I declare that Valentina Morales is now legally the daughter of Andrew Mendez. Full name, Valentina Morales Mendez." The world stopped. Andrew stood still for a moment, his mouth half open, his hands shaking. He didn't cry right away. He just looked at her. Valentina, now Mendez, his daughter. She looked at him with eyes full of tears, but with a slight, shy smile. "Now I can call you Dad." Andrew couldn't respond with words. He just nodded slowly, his eyes filled with tears. And then she jumped into his arms, buried her face in his shoulder, and said very softly, "Thank you, Dad." On the way back, the car was silent. Andrew drove slowly, his hands steady on the steering wheel until he stopped at a red light. He looked ahead, took a deep breath, and let go. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was an old cry, kept inside for years. A cry that came from the depths of his soul. Free, strong, real. His hands gripped the steering wheel. His shoulders shook. It was then that he felt a tug on his shirt. Valentina stretched out her little arm with frightened eyes and an open heart. "If you cry, I'll hold your hand." And she held it with all the strength a 7-year-old girl could muster. There, inside that car, stopped in the middle of the city, with the world rushing by outside, a broken man and a wounded girl found refuge in each other. Now, father and daughter in name, in heart, in life. The house was changing. Before, the hallways were silent, the rooms closed, the furniture covered with sheets that held more dust than memories. But now, little by little, the mansion was beginning to take on color. Little footsteps could be heard on the wooden floor. Doors that never opened were now ajar, letting in light, wind, and life. Andrew, without telling anyone, made a simple but very special decision. He transformed the old office on the second floor, where no one ever went, into a workshop just for Valentina. He cleaned everything himself, removed old books, moved shelves, opened the windows, painted the walls white, put in a long, light wood table, boxes of colored pencils, paints, brushes, little bottles of glitter and glue, a small easel in the corner, and a soft rug on the floor. Now it was her place, a space just for creating, imagining, breathing. When Valentina saw it, she was silent for a few seconds. Then she smiled slowly, bit her lip, and ran to hug him. "Is it all mine?" she asked, her eyes shining. "It's all yours," he replied with a calm smile. "Here you can draw whatever you want, whatever is in your heart." And she drew. She spent hours in there, every day with soft music playing in the background, her bare feet moving in the air, her tongue between her teeth, deeply concentrated. She drew flowers, houses, trees, little birds, but one day, without saying anything, she hung her first drawing on the corkboard next to the window. It was simple, done with colored pencils, but it said more than 1,000 words. 4 people: her, wearing a blue dress and a bow in her hair; Andrew, wearing a white coat and kind eyes; and in the sky, 2 women in red dresses, holding hands and floating among colorful clouds, Renata and Daniela. Valentina pointed her finger, explaining as if it were obvious. "This is my mom," she said, touching the woman with loose hair. "And this is Aunt Ree. They are together, up there, in the sky, watching over us." Andrew looked at the drawing with tears in his eyes, ran his fingers slowly over the paper, and whispered, "They would love this." Valentina nodded seriously. "I know." On the white wall, that drawing became the center of everything. It wasn't just a child's art. It was memory. It was faith. It was love drawn with simple pencils by hands that had already felt so much pain. And there, in that workshop, full of color and hope, the past and the present embraced each other forever. Valentina had grown up a little. She was a teenager now. Her hair now reached halfway down her back, tied in a ponytail that she did herself every morning. Andrew was downstairs, organizing papers, when he heard a soft, almost hesitant voice coming from upstairs. Daddy went upstairs without rushing, thinking she wanted help with a drawing, or maybe more paper for the workshop. But when he entered her room, he found Valentina sitting on the floor, surrounded by open boxes, old books, and a small leather-bound diary in her hands. She looked up, and something in her gaze already said that what was there was important. "I found it in a closet in the old room, the one that was locked." Andrew approached slowly, recognizing the cover from a distance. It was Renata's diary. His heart was pounding. He hadn't seen it since she left. He never had the courage to read it again, to open it, to face her words in silence. Valentina opened the diary carefully, as if afraid of damaging the ink on the pages. She showed him a page marked with colorful old candy wrappers and pointed to a sentence underlined in bold, emotional handwriting. "My sister is an angel. I will always help her. I would give my life for her." Valentina read aloud, her heart in her mouth. Then she looked at Andrew with tears in her eyes. She was an angel too, wasn't she? He sat down next to her, didn't speak right away, just took the diary with trembling hands, ran his fingers over the writing of the woman he loved, and let a tear fall on the page. "Yes, she was," he replied, his voice breaking. She loved her sister more than anything. They were inseparable. Valentina rested her head on his shoulder, and my mom returned the gesture. With his life, Andrew nodded, hugging her from the side. It was love on both sides, and that love reached you. Now it's here inside us. They stayed there for a while in silence, turning the pages carefully, as if touching a piece of eternity. In that diary, written so many years ago, were the words that united destinies. And now, the one reading it was the girl that Renata and Daniela loved before they met her. Valentina was not only part of their past, she was the present, that continued to walk with the strength of a love that crossed everything, even time, even fire, even silence. Andrew took a long time to make the decision. It didn't happen overnight. He spent months looking at the room where he had last operated, the instruments carefully arranged, the files in order, the gown hanging on the door. Every corner of that office had a part of him. He hid there for years, trying to escape the pain. He lived there on autopilot, taking care of others so he wouldn't have to look inside himself. But now, everything was different. Now he knew what it meant to truly care. It was on a quiet afternoon that he locked the door. For the last time, he left the keys on the table, took a deep breath, and walked out without looking back. Days later, construction began on the new project. A large, old house, lovingly restored, with wide hallways, large windows, rooms with colorful walls, a library full of children's books, music rooms, art rooms, toys, all designed with a single purpose in mind: to give children what many never had, a home, even if only for a while, a place where love was not a luxury, but a rule. The Renata and Daniela Foundation was born with that name as a promise not to let the sacrifice of the two be forgotten. At the opening, the place was packed. Volunteers, journalists, doctors, ordinary people. Andrew stood next to Valentina, now with longer hair, a firm posture, and a calm gleam in her eyes. She was no longer the frightened girl she had been before. She was a young woman with great strength, with the living memory of the two women who gave her everything. She climbed onto the small stage set up in the garden and took the microphone in both hands. The audience fell silent. She carefully unfolded a piece of paper and began to read. "This is where the love of my mother and my aunt became a refuge for more children, where no one else goes to sleep in fear, where every hug is medicine, where no one will be forgotten." She paused and looked at Andrew. "If I am alive, it is because two women loved me with everything they had. And if other children are going to be saved today, it is because their hearts continue to beat here, in every corner of this place." Her voice broke, but she finished with a smile. Everyone applauded, standing. Andrew wiped his eyes without shame, and there, in the middle of that crowd, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace of having found his place in the world. Because now he knew that the love Renata and Daniela left behind was not buried with them. It blossomed. The years passed calmly and lovingly. Valentina grew up surrounded by paintings, stories, and hugs. And Andrew, although his hair was whiter, now had a sparkle in his eyes that only those who have known pain and chosen love again have. It was her idea. "Dad, what if we tell everything in a book?" she asked one night, sitting in the foundation's courtyard under a sky full of stars. Everything, but as a story, like a tale, only truly ours. He was silent for a moment, then smiled with a heavy heart. And so the book was born. The Girl from the Sky and the Doctor of the Stars wrote it together, page by page. At first, Andrew had his doubts. He thought he no longer knew how to put feelings on paper, but Valentina guided him with her gentle manner. She recounted her memories with simplicity, drew the scenes, and showed each emotion without embellishment, just as she had experienced it in the book. She spoke of pain, yes. She spoke of fire, of fear, of loneliness, but she spoke more of love, of embrace, of reunion, of the value of belief. Once again, when they finished it, no publisher wanted to publish it at first. They said it was too sensitive, too sad, but it was enough for a public school included it in a group reading. And everything changed. The children read and cried. The teachers had to stop the class. Parents began to read it too, and unexpectedly questions arose that no one had asked before. "Dad, why are there children who don't have a home? Mom, can we help someone? What if I were like Valentina?" And little by little, something changed. The Ministry of Education included the book in the reading plan. More schools adopted it. Adoption campaigns became stronger. Ordinary people began to visit shelters, bring food, give affection, and listen to stories. The book became a bridge between those who suffered and those who could love, between a painful past and a present with new opportunities. Valentina and Andrew signed books together, he always with tears in his eyes. She had the same smile she had learned to have since she first said, "Dad." On the last page of the book, she wrote, "My mom and my aunt are no longer here, but now, with every child who finds a hug, they come back to life, and no one who read it left the same." Andrew always thought that one day he would have answers, that time, books, diagnoses, and silence would bring some kind of explanation, a key to understanding why everything happened the way it did, why Renata left, why Daniela had to suffer so much, why that girl appeared right on the sidewalk outside the hospital with her eyes, with the gaze of the daughter he never had. For a long time, he searched for answers like someone searching for air to breathe. But now, sitting on the Foundation's terrace with Valentina lying on a bench next to him, the book open on his lap, he knew the answer would never come. And that was okay, because what he found was greater. It was meaning. Andrew watched the children running in the courtyard, the volunteers serving food, helping with homework, telling stories. He watched Valentina laugh at something silly, laugh freely, peacefully, laugh like someone who had survived the worst and still chose to love. His chest felt full, but it wasn't a weight. It was like being complete. It was as if, after so many years, he was whole again, not because he had forgotten the pain, but because he had learned to carry it calmly. He reached out and stroked Valentina's hair. She looked at him with that look that says everything without saying anything. "What are you thinking about?" she asked in a calm voice. He took a moment to answer, then smiled. "About how life taught me the hard way that meaning is not found, it is felt." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they remained there in silence. Nothing else was needed, because in the end, it wasn't about understanding what was lost. It was about what was built afterwards. The night was silent, peaceful. Outside, the clear sky showed the stars clearly. A gentle breeze moved the leaves in the garden, and the soft light in the living room cast warm shadows on the walls. The house, once so full of cold silence, now breathed a different kind of silence, the kind that comes from peace. Valentina, now a teenager, sat down at the old piano that Andrew had restored years ago. It was a birthday gift. He found the instrument covered with cloth in an antique store, and that same day had it repaired key by key, as if restoring the voice of something that had also been waiting a long time. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and placed her fingers on the keys, her eyes closed, her body calm. There was no audience, no rush, just her and a memory. The first note sounded like a whisper, then another and another. The melody was simple, slow, sweet, but full of memory. It was the same song Renata used to hum on cold nights when she thought no one was listening. Andrew remembered it clearly. She hummed softly while folding clothes, or when he came home tired from the hospital and found the room warm with her voice. A song without a name, but with soul. Valentina had never heard Renata sing, but now it seemed as if she remembered it, even though she had never experienced it. Andrew leaned against the door, watching silently with tears in his eyes. Each note seemed to touch an old nostalgia within him, but it no longer hurt. It was a beautiful, gentle nostalgia, like when you find a place to rest in the past. Valentina played with her heart, unhurried, as if talking to something invisible. And when she finished, she stayed there with her fingers still on the keys, feeling the sound fade away, little by little. "That was her song, right?" she asked without looking back. Andrew nodded. His voice choked. She turned her face. She smiled a little. "I think he still sings, only now he listens from here." He walked towards her. Slowly, he sat down beside her, put his arm around her shoulders, and they stayed there in silence, listening to what cannot be heard with the ears, but with the heart. Because in that room, in that music, in that girl, Renata was alive, and everything made sense. And now, I want to hear from you. If you were in Dr. Andrews' place, would you open your heart to a foreign child? Write your thoughts in the comments. You might change someone's mind. Keep following us so you don't miss the next story.